Hello and welcome to this recorded webinar on setting up a community interest company. My name's Jenny Wildblood and I'm one of the information and advice advisors at Voska. If you haven't heard about Voska before, we're basically an infrastructure organisation serving Bristol. This means that we support any organisation that's part of the voluntary community sector in Bristol in a variety of different ways to enable organisations to do their work most effectively and support them to fix any issues they might have. We do this with information intelligence and by supporting partnerships, formal and informal. We provide our job site, which is the go-to place for anybody looking for paid or unpaid opportunities in the sector in Bristol. And we also provide advice, consultancy and training. Where possible, we supply that for free where we are funded, but we also have a paid-for service so that you can employ us to give you bespoke training. For example, for your trustees, if you're a charity. If you'd like to find out more about this, go to www.voska.org, email us at info@voska.org, or give us a ring on 0117 909 9949. So in this webinar, we'll cover what actually are CICs. When is a CIC the right choice for your organisation? Choosing the right structure for your CIC, setting up your CIC, and some of the basic things you'll need to do to make sure you're running your CIC well. Can I say at this point that some people call them CICs, some people call them KICs. And so you'll find that sometimes I say CIC and sometimes I say KIC. And it's entirely up to you how you want to describe them. The first thing to think about, and that I hope you'll bear in mind throughout the webinar, that setting up a business is a serious decision to take. And we can't cover everything you need to know here, but we aim to make this a good place to start and to give you the context for many of the decisions that you're going to have to make. The links that you'll need are on the Voska website, where you may already have visited to find a link to this webinar. But if you come straight here into YouTube, go and find this on the Voska website, and that's where you'll see the links. So for a start off, what is a CIC? A CIC is a legal structure governed by the Companies Act of 2006. And it's a type of social enterprise. And it's called that because it's a limited company, but it has special features to ensure that it works for the benefit of the community. And CICs as a model supports a very wide range of activities, from tiny little clubs to multi-million pound services. A CIC has to have one or more directors. Charitable funders will want you to have 2 to 3 unrelated directors as a minimum. Directors can be paid or unpaid. Paid have the same rights and duties as any other directors. And they must satisfy the KIC regulator, who will carry out a community interest test to make sure that what you're doing deserves to be seen as worthy of a KIC. So what are the benefits? Setting up a KIC means that your organisation has limited liability. This means that you're protected against liability for mistakes that may be made. This is very useful, but it isn't absolute. If you do something particularly stupid or particularly illegal, you can lose your limited liability. And usually there's a nominal amount that if there are issues, you would have to pay. And it's usually £1 each. Directors can be paid, and they can be paid for doing their job as directors, so attending meetings, for example, and they can be paid for doing the work of the organisation without any particular issues or limits. And that isn't how it is for a charity, where the trustees have to be volunteers, and where even where trustees can be paid, there are big limits on how that might operate. And a CIC as a model does have access to some grant funding. It has lighter governance and regulation than a charity, but that doesn't mean that you can just go on your merry way. You will still have to be thinking about how you're going to provide accounts and reports. Being a KIC gives a reassurance to stakeholders, particularly grant makers, but also perhaps people who might want to give you donations or join you in a form of partnership, because you have an asset look and a regulated community purpose. I'll say a little bit more about that as we go on. And a CIC is relatively quick, easy, and inexpensive to set up, though the fact that it's quick, easy, and inexpensive is not the best reason for starting a CIC. There are other options. You could set up a registered charity that's also incorporated, a CIO or charitable company, or go for an unincorporated registered charity model. But your key questions there are, where will you get your income? So the expectation is that a CIC or KIC will get some form of trading income, either by direct sales or by accepting work under contract. Do you want to be paid as a director, and do you want to retain control? And how will the surpluses be used? Do you want your business to be generating large amounts of money for you, or will you be happy to just be paid at the market rate for the work that you do? And another important thing is, can you actually make this pay? So will your business model work, and will it work to the extent that you be able to afford the tax that you might have to pay on your income? So CICs might get discretionary business rate relief, but they don't have special tax status and can't receive gift aid on donations. If you'd like more information on CICs and tax, we have a resource available on our website. So please remember that you will be setting up a business, so do your homework. Make sure that your business model will be working for you. Do some financial projections, do some market research. If there are already a lot of other organisations working in exactly the same area as you want to work, your chances of success will be very much smaller. The ideal for a KIC is that you will be a company where you will have trading income, but that can be supported by grants to make sure that the community benefit is happening in the best way. An example might be if your KIC is going to run a cafe where people with particular challenges will be employed. The main income will be from running the cafe. But you could also apply for grants to make sure that the support and particular support that the people who you employ need will be able to be provided. You won't have the same access to grant funding that a charity has. This is because fewer funders support CICs, and those that do often have very specific requirements. I've already said if you're a CIC with only one director, you're extremely unlikely to get any charitable funding. But here's an example of what I'm talking about from Quartet Community Foundation's website. If you're not from our area, Quartet is the community foundation for Bristol, Baines, South Gloss and North Somerset. And they have very particular requirements for the kinds of CICs that they will support. So you can see that they want to see that the majority of directors aren't related and that the majority are not paid, and that the benefits received by the paid directors are decided on by the non-executive directors. So there are different structures that you can choose for your CIC. And there are two basic ways to set up. You should be limited by guarantee if you're going to want to apply for charitable grants, or you can set up as limited by shares. This webinar is basically supporting CICs that will be limited by guarantee. Please, you're very welcome to continue watching, and there will be things of use to you, but one thing we're not able to cover are the ins and outs of share ownership as they apply to CICs. But it is worthwhile having a think about this and doing your own research, because there are limits on how shares and private investment in CICs can work. So one of the things you'll need to think about is how membership will show itself in the structure of your CIC. All companies have to have members and directors. And the members are ultimately the decision makers, so they are the people with the big responsibility for the overall decisions on the company. But the governing document, which in your case is the Articles of Association, delegates the day-to-day authority to the directors. So if you go for a large membership organisation, you have more members than directors, and the members get together usually once a year at the AGM to elect the directors in and to approve how well the company has been doing over the past year, to ask questions and to give their input. Or you can have the model where the members and the directors are exactly the same people. And in that case, the directors appoint each other. But either way, your governing document will sometimes talk about members and sometimes talk about directors. So it's very important that you understand that there are two jobs going on in your company, even if both jobs are held by exactly the same people. There's no particular good or bad way to do this. It's entirely up to you. Some organisations, it works better if they have more members than directors, perhaps because that's the way they've been used to run things anyway. For others, not having a larger membership is the best way for them to work. It's entirely up to you. So how do you go about registering your CIC? The first thing that you'll do is set up your registration account, and that is a government gateway account. So it's part of the government system for tax payments as well as company registration. So you'll also need it to make your returns and pay any tax that's due. So obviously this is a very important thing, and please share your login details with at least one other director. Of course, you can recover your login details, but it can take a while to do that. So you need to have decided, are you limited by guarantee or shares, and what type of membership are you going to have? And then you need to check your name. You can't have the same name, exactly the same name as any other company. So if you've got some ideas, check whether they're available by searching on the Companies House website. And you'll also need to think carefully about what skills and knowledge and experience do the directors have to make sure that they can run the KIC successfully. You'll need to state on your application what your standard industrial classification of economic activities, not very easy to say, so people usually say SIC code, will be. And that's just, you'll need to tick a box to say, this is what we do. And this is part of a big government system that records the type of businesses that are setting up in the UK. All you need to do is go and have a look at the list and find out what you think more best meets the aims and activities of your KIC. You may need to think about whether or not you're going to have people of significant control. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. And you might also like to think about your financial year start date. So at the moment, the cost, if you're going to apply, is £65 online and £86 by post. This is slower as well as more expensive, and it's not the most efficient way by any means of setting up your company. So if you possibly can do it online, please do. And just note that these costs are correct as of January 2026, but please check in case the cost has increased since then. You'll have a governing document to provide. This comes in two parts, the Memorandum of Association and the Articles of Association. And your governing document is a set of principles and rules that guide how your company will work. You'll need your KIC 36, which is the Declaration on Formation of a KIC. And that's where you explain what you're going to be doing and why and how it will have community benefit. You'll need, as we've already said, your Articles of Association. The Memorandum of Association is automatically generated if you apply online. And if you're applying by post, you'll also have to complete the IN01 form, which is the Companies House registration. So the Articles of Association. You will need to do some work. There are very good model articles available on the YouGov website. And once you know whether or not you're going to be a large or small model CIC, and you know if you're going to be limited by shares or guarantee, you'll be able to select the right model for you to use. But before you actually use it, you'll need to do some work to make it yours. And one of the things that you'll need to do is be very clear about defining what you're going to be doing and what community you'll benefit. So there's an example on screen here. To provide daycare and transport facilities for the elderly and physically disadvantaged in North Somerset. So that says what we're going to do, provide daycare and transport, who we're going to do it for, the elderly and physically disadvantaged. And in that case, it makes it clear why there is a community benefit there. And it says what geographical area this is going to happen in, which is North Somerset. Your articles of association also make it clear how your company will run. So things like membership, appointment of removal of directors, and voting. When you download your model, it will be very clear which bits you can alter to meet your own requirements and which bits you need to keep. One of the main things that you can define for yourself is things like the number of directors and the quorum for meetings, but there are other things that you can't change. And the asset lock will be defined both in how the company runs and what will happen to anything left after you've paid all your bills if you should happen to close. So in a CIC, all the assets, which includes profits and surpluses, are locked into the CIC so that they can only benefit the community you were set up to support. And having the asset lock is one of the main reasons why charitable funders are able to support CICs, because as you can see, it gives them protection to make sure that the grant money they give you, won't just be used by you to hoard in the business, sell the business, and then take all of the income for yourself. So if the CIC closes, all assets left over after you paid your bills are transferred to a designated CIC or charity. And you select which CIC or charity that is as part of the application process. So, as we've said, the asset lock means that any stakeholder can be reassured that any assets of this CIC can only be used for the benefit of the community. And you need to think about who your designated charity or CIC is going to be and specify them in the CIC's Articles of Association. You'll see where that particular information goes when you download the model. At the moment, that can't be altered, but I think that may well be changed because obviously organisations come and go. You don't need to tell the organisation that you nominate that you've nominated them. They have no need to know anything about this until you might happen to close. So once you've got your articles sorted out, you can then start thinking about the KIC 36, the Declaration on Formation of a Community Interest Company. So this is the form that the KIC regulator bases their decision on. So this is how you show that you are going to have a community benefit, so you'll meet the community interest test. So your first question on the KIC 36 is just about the overview of what you're set up to do and who you're going to be doing it for. And that should be the same as how you've defined this on your Articles of Association. Then you'll be asked to break this down into individual activities that you might be running and then state what the benefits of those activities are going to be. This at first can seem a bit daunting, but the thing to remember is just state the obvious. You don't have to be clever about this. You just need to say, we will run art workshops for families. This will benefit families because they will be able to come along and be creative and have experiences together. Whatever it might be, just state the obvious. And another thing that you'll be asked to talk about on the KIC 36 is persons of significant control, or PSCs. And the ways that you can spot a PSC are listed on screen, but it's basically somebody who has more power to appoint directors, make and influence decisions than any other director. So somebody who has directly or indirectly of strong influence on the running of the company. And it's obviously important that outsiders should understand that such a person exists. Sadly, it also covers anybody who directly or indirectly holds more than 25% of the voting rights, which means that if you have fewer than 4 directors, they will all have to register as a PSC. But don't forget to change this if and when you appoint more directors. And when you become a company director, you will now need to verify your identity formally. This can be a complicated process, but for anybody who holds any recognised form of biometric or photo ID, it's relatively simple. And once you've received your ID number as generated by the system, you only need to do this once, but your company needs to have the identity number for every director before any returns can be made. And obviously that can be an issue, because if you don't make your returns, you can be fined. So after registration, once you've pressed the button and your application has gone through, so long as you paid attention and answered everything and made sure everything's signed off properly, you should get your answer within 5 to 10 working days. And it will either be a yes or it might be a qualified no. They might come back and ask you additional questions, or they might say, for example, you submitted your governing document, but it wasn't signed and dated as having been accepted by the board of directors, so we can't accept it. And once you've fixed whatever issue there might be, you can apply again. And once you become a company director, you have particular legal requirements that you have to meet. So you have to act within the company's powers as defined on your articles. You have to promote the success of the company when you're acting on its behalf. So if you have a conflict of interest, if you're also financially or involved with another organisation in a governance position, you will have to state that if there is any possibility that you might influence a decision in a way that might make that not work as well for your company, you have to state that and then make sure that you're not part of that particular decision-making process. So, for example, you might have a family member who runs a company that could provide services for your CIC. It's obviously not okay for you to speak up on behalf of your family member during the decision-making process, because the result could be that the CIC pays too much or doesn't get the quality of service they need. You'll need to be financially responsible and accountable. Finance and numbers aren't the favourite thing for every one of us, but even if this isn't your thing, you need to make sure that you know what's going on for the money in your company. And that doesn't just mean how much money you've got in the bank and how much money you're expecting to get in, but it means really understanding and learning about how money moves through your business, where it comes from, and what it gets spent on. And also thinking about where you can save money and where you can invest to make more money. You need to exercise independent judgment. That is an easy thing to say, but it's not an easy thing to do. If you're the only person in the room who isn't sure that a an upcoming decision is right, then you need to speak up and say. And as part of that, your fellow directors need to listen and support you. And you need to exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence. And the word reasonable really matters here. You don't have to be an accountant or a solicitor, but you do need to keep an eye out on what's happening in the world that might affect what you do, and that things like your policies and procedures are up to date, that your insurance is sufficient, all of these basic things that need to happen to make sure that you're doing a good job. Your reporting requirements are that you will have to put in a KIC 34 report, and that goes alongside your accounts and a fee. And if you're late with your reports, extra fees will be applied. If any of you have experience in the charity field, you may think, oh, well, it doesn't matter to be a little bit late. And that only applies to the Charity Commission. Believe me, Companies House are very different. They start fining you immediately, and they keep on fining you until you've put your accounts in. So don't leave it to the last minute to get this job sorted. Your report and any updates and the names of your directors, all of this will be placed on public record. And HMRC will upload your financial records and use that as the basis for your tax bill for the year, if that applies to you. Your KIC will need to report on what you've been up to over your past year, what consultation, if any, that you've taken with your stakeholders, and what actions you've taken as a result. And you'll need to make sure that in some place, either in the written report or on your accounts, that director's remuneration, in other words, what you've been paid, will be clear. Directors can be paid, as I've said before, either for being a director or for being a director and or doing operational work. But there are rules. You can't just pay yourself whatever you want. You need to think carefully about the value of the work that you're doing and the usual market rates for that kind of work. You'll also have to state if there have been any transfer of assets for less than full value. And you can only do transfer for less than full value if it meets your community objectives. So remember that you have an asset lock in this company. So everything that the company owns belongs only to the company. And I'm sure you can see that there might be a sneaky way around this. If you could just sell the company's assets or transfer them cheaply to somebody, that would not meet the requirements of having an asset lock. So an example might be if your CIC provides computer training for young people, and you have some laptops that have come to the end of the useful life, but they're still usable, just not only for you. You can do two things with them to meet the requirements of your asset lock. You can either sell them at a good market price for what they are, or you could give them away free or very low cost to the young people who you're working with to support their further education and learning. What wouldn't be okay is to give them away or sell them extremely cheaply to, for example, your granddad or an adult who doesn't come in any way under your community objectives. So your aims for the future will be obviously maintaining and developing a really strong business model that works to keep you sustainable. Monitoring and developing your impact in delivering your community benefit. So make sure you're really having the impact on people's lives that the CIC was set up to achieve. And of course, maintaining the most effective board of directors that will enable you to do number 1 and number 2. And these links are available on the VOSCA website, but just to talk you through them, the KIC regulator has lots of information that you'll find useful, including the KIC FAQs. The Get Legal website is run by an excellent charity, and they provide legal advice and support for a wide range of social enterprises and voluntary organisations, including recorded webinars on many useful legal issues such as contract law. And NCVO Know-How Nonprofit, part of the information they provide is behind a membership wall, but you can become a member fairly cheaply whilst your income is low. And they have a very wide range of sources of information and support. And of course, don't forget us at VOSCA. And I hope that once you've set up your CIC, you think about becoming a member of VOSCA. This will give you access to a range of different benefits, but it will also mean that you can join with us in adding your voice to making sure that people of power and influence in our city understand all the vital work that we do. So good luck. I hope you enjoy the process of setting up your CIC. If you have further questions and you're a Bristol-based organisation, get back in touch with us, and good luck with your application.